Hey there, welcome to the Jarrett Hill Show. I am, as you may have guessed, Jarrett Hill, and I'm very excited to have you all here joining me for the very first episode of the Jarrett Hill Show. We are going to be jumping right into some conversations that I'm excited to be having with some folks that have opinions that I value. And each week here, we're going to be talking to different folks who I see as troublemakers, folks who are making trouble. And when I say troublemaking, I mean that good trouble that we've heard about over the years. Folks like Bayard Rustin or John Lewis that have talked to us about the ways in which we can make good trouble for our communities and to better our world. And these are folks who I think are making trouble, who are coming in and giving us a perspective that is useful, that is valuable, that is empowering. And also, that is not a perspective that we always get in all of our mainstream media. So I'm really excited to be joined by the folks that will be here with me. Most of you will know one of our guests today from the past podcast that I've hosted with Fanti. The book that I wrote, Historically Black Phrases from I Want Your Little Friends to Who All Gonna Be There. Tre'vell Anderson is going to be here in just a moment. Karmen Michael Smith, the author of Holy Queer, which has been one of the books that really moved me. He will be here joining us a little bit and talking about tithing in a way that I've not ever thought about tithing, and the ways that has reshaped his life. Dr. Corey Emanuel is going to be here. He's a media psychologist. Dr. Corey is actually doing a long form interview with me that you guys will be seeing on Friday, but he's also going to be talking with us about some of the things happening in the world. And I'm very excited to bring all of them in. So I'm going to bring them all in right now. Tre'vell, welcome aboard. It's weird being on mic again with you here in this capacity.
You're welcome.
It's traumatic. It's all the things it is, but I'm grateful that you are here. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here, beloved. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Dr. I say Dr. Karmen Michael Smith, but Reverend Karmen Michael Smith. Karmen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations. About time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Corey Emanuel, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It feels like it's been forever since we sat down and had an intimate conversation, right?
Or in the last few minutes, whichever one it is. But thank you all for being here. I'm grateful for all of y'all's perspectives and being a part of the show today. Tre'vell, I want to come to you first. We've had an interesting week that's coming up this weekend. We have a movie that's coming out that a lot of people are talking about. I have been watching your show Seated that you co-host with Ray Love Jr. You guys say that is the blackest show about movies. And this weekend we have a movie coming out called You, Me, and Tuscany. And there's a conversation around the film that I'm actually really irritated around it because I feel like it's a conversation we have often. I'm going to play a clip from the Today Show yesterday where Regé and Halle Bailey were talking to Craig Melvin, excuse me. And
the reality is that there are not a lot of rom-coms out there where they feature folks that look like us. And I read recently that there are even some studios that are actively watching to see how this movie does before they greenlight other rom-coms featuring people that look like us. What kind of message do you hope this film sends?
I mean, I hope that everyone who walks out of that cinema feels like this is for them. The aspirational, whimsical, joyful escapades into the sunset, finding your perfect life, finding your perfect love. Everyone can have that. Everyone can do that.
Yeah.
We didn't make Tuscany up. It's not a fantasy movie. It's fantastical.
Yeah.
But you should walk out going, I can buy that ticket. I can live my best life. I can be that brave. And absolutely everyone deserves that, and everyone does live that in real life.
Yes, and we need to see more of our stories on screen. I mean, it's beautiful that we have a theatrical release. Like, people can go to the theaters to see this movie and experience this joy and adventure and go for this wild ride.
You have there at the bottom. The feeling for me here is Halle Bailey and Regé are not going to save the Black story. This idea that every big Black movie that comes out is going to be the one that is going to be the barometer of whether or not we should get more Black stories told. I'm curious how you think about that because I'm irritated.
Well, yes. You know, I think many of us are irritated at the ways that our in quotation marks films, right, get this like undue pressure or this undue responsibility to or burden on its shoulders to like sell all the, you know, all the tickets at the box office and prove, right, to these folks in the highest offices in Hollywood that our stories somehow matter. I think it's super frustrating, but you're right. This is something we've heard before, right? This is very similar to the whole Black films don't travel myth that gets recycled out every few years. It is unfortunate because the reality is it then robs us of an ability to, like, you know, truly grapple with these films in the way that we should, right? We feel like we not gonna get another rom-com for some time, and so we don't want to say that the movie might not be the best. I may or may not have seen it already, but we'll leave that for seated. Check it out. But you know what I mean? Like we don't get to do that. We don't get to do that when we're worried about whether or not this film will allow us to have more rom-coms with Black leads to come. And that is the real kind of like disappointment out of all of this.
I feel like we have had this conversation around so many different Will Packer movies, even, right? When we were having Think Like a Man as like the movie that's going to save the Black movie, Girls Trip, the movie that's going to save the Black movie. And I mean, we've heard this about other Black movies, but Dr. Corey, when we're thinking about this from a media psychology standpoint, as you think about how people take this information in and it resonates with them, how do you think about like how people are hearing this message and what they're taking away from it, and when they're putting so much investment in these stars and these movies?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is an interesting time. I think that, you know, there will certainly be people who are interested in going to see a rom-com right now. And then there's some people that aren't really checking for that. You know, we live in an era now where people are really interested in true crime series. We're living in an era where people are watching their penny, so they'd rather binge watch something from home because they've subscribed to that platform. So I think putting all of this pressure on this cast, I think to tre'vell's point, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into making a really great movie, you know, casting, writing. And so to have all of that riding on the shoulders of these two young people, I really think that that's unfair. Yeah, and then I think it's unfair to where the audience is right now, going back to those different factors that I just mentioned.
Yeah, one of the things that frustrates me with this story is like, I feel like it is kind of the same way that we have frustration or upset around the ways that we don't get honored at the different award shows, or the ways that we don't see enough of our stories being told in various different capacities. And I think the thing that frustrates me is there is a requirement that we act like we don't know that this white supremacist system is doing what it's doing. And tre'vell, I would ask you, as you have worked in this industry for so long, I'm curious how you think about the ways that we are always having this conversation around it, but not having the conversation about like the real issue in the broader media. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the reality is that, you know, the majority of people engaging in this kind of conversation are not seriously interested in grappling with, right, the various systems and structures that are at play that lead us to a point where studio executives are still saying this kind of thing, you know, to people, and then folks feel the need to share it with broader audiences because they know it'll impact their work. You know, what I find interesting is that, to your point, we can have, and we often do have, conversations about how we can divest from certain systems, how we can redirect our money and our energy and our clicks and all of that to other places. And the reality is we don't do that. And so we often ourselves, right, end up playing our same role in this self-fulfilling cycle of discourse around these things, right? Because to your point, we don't really want to talk about how various systems, including the Hollywood system, are actually set up from their foundation to keep our stories out of the theater.
Well, as we're talking about the Hollywood system, I think another interesting story that we've seen over the last week and a half or so kind of developing is with Chilli versus Kanye, and the ways in which we hear people talking about Chilli and Kanye and their alignment or their resurgence and these different things. I've been interested in this conversation around Chilli and Kanye, and either one of you can jump in on this. To me, I've heard people saying like, oh, people are tearing down Chilli and saying that she's trash, but then the stadium is packed with people at Kanye's concert. And I think those things are true, but those things are not necessarily related, right? And I think it's an interesting conversation to hear people having and juxtaposing those things, because we certainly see that Black women get handled in different ways than Black men do. Black women are given less leeway in the ways that Black men are. But I also think like there are people who are at the Kanye concert. I don't think a whole bunch of those people are the same people that are canceling Chilli because of her Trump donations. I'm curious how y'all are thinking about that. Any of you can jump in.
Well, I see it as a transparency issue. Being a little bit older, our generation didn't have transparency of artists' lives. Like I grew up knowing I would never be at a club and Janet Jackson was going to be there. That just wasn't going to happen. And so now in this, almost ending era of transparency, and we show you everything, and everything's behind the scenes always and revealing. Chilli came up through that time. We've seen Kanye through the transparency, but Chilli came up in that 90s, 2000, where we didn't really see everything about Chilli's life in the same way that we see all of the artists. Kanye has offered it all up. So people are not necessarily surprised at anything that Kanye does at this point. But Chilli feels fresh because we have not seen, we didn't really know, we had not attributed anything. And so I think for a lot of people, they're like, this is a shock. We didn't know, and you're a Black woman. And so I think that all of those things play. But I think for many people, they're just shocked because we didn't know that much about Chilli.
I go ahead, tre'vell.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think part of this is I think we have to also talk about each of their audiences, right? Kanye's audience is a very different audience than Chilli and TLC, right? They about to go on the Aunties tour, okay? You
maybe we hope.
Well,
right.
Well, we gonna see, but she because of that, what I'm trying to say is she's accountable to a different subset of people that I think Kanye is. To your point, Jarrett, about the people going to Kanye are not necessarily the people who are also canceling Chilli, and yet still, I do think that it is an opportunity for us to have a conversation about what accountability looks like for our Black, celebrities, notables, etc. And however we, want to deal with that kind of business, because I feel like the people who went to go see Kanye West probably similarly as anti-Black as he is. Okay.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Go ahead, Corey.
Well, no, I was going to say, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with making sense of behavior is not the same as endorsing it. So I do want to make that clear before I make the comment. But I think something that's often left out of the conversation, particularly with Kanye and the massive artists that he is around the world is there's something in psychology called social identity theory, and it speaks to how often we tend to favor the in group versus the out group because the in group it gets intertwined with our self identity. What I mean by that is a lot of Kanye's fans and followers, they deeply identify with him. And they identify with him in a number of ways. It could be the mental health issues, it could be the death of the mom, it could be attitudes, beliefs, all of those different things. But whatever way they identify with him, it runs particularly deep as they look to him as someone not being misunderstood the way he is, right? They find belonging in that community, being in that stadium. That's so much of the conversation I'm hearing is like how many people showed up in that stadium. And there's this sense of belonging that happens even in not belonging. So like they know, many of them know like people were not really, F with me if they knew how down I was with Kanye. And there's some belonging that happens in that because they're part of this not belonging group that he's sort of like the champion of. And so it could be misogyny, it could be all of these different things, but I do think the social identity piece runs deep when it comes to Kanye.
I think the challenge for me here, and I wrestle with this a lot, is if Kanye were a family member of ours or someone that we had, a little bit closer relationship to or with, and he had misbehaved, he had done things that we didn't like, he had said things that were harmful or offensive, etc. Like, is there no redeeming for that person in our life? Right. And like, if so, what does that redeeming require? And tre'vell, you and I have had that conversation around Kanye on Fanti years ago around the ways that he has shown up until then. And I'm intrigued by this moment with Kanye because we have seen him come out and make like a lengthy apology. He's talked about how his treatment has gone, how his medication has affected him, all these different things. Mind you, it was in a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal right before his album came out, right? And so all of that kind of was a contextualization that hit with people, particularly in a way that was particularly foul tasting, if you will. Does that apology, does the story of who he is, what he's been through, to Corey's point, the idea of understanding or making sense of, but not necessarily endorsing, how do y'all think about that?
I look at apology, as many people do, is the best apology is change behavior. And so I can hear the words, I can read them in the Wall Street Journal, I can listen to Chilli's explanation / apology / I'm trying to get out of this really quickly, my opinion, but it's change behavior. And so,
Yeah.
okay, you said this thing, you apologized for it, and now I need to watch. Now I need to witness. And so that's how I look at whether it's a family member, a public figure, an artist, just what is the change behavior? Because if you said you no longer do this and you apologize for this and I'm with the community and I'm doing this, great. Let me see it.
Yeah, and to your point, like, Jarrett, I've been writing this book that's coming out in October called Empathy Crisis. And I think to your point, without the change behavior, it is very difficult to extend empathy to people, even our family members, right? Like you said, I'm not going to the Christmas dinner, I'm not going to the Thanksgiving dinner if that person's going to be there, because I've never seen change behavior, apology, nothing. And I'm not going to put myself in that environment. So it's understandable.
tre'vell, how does the apology and feedback from Kanye over the last few weeks, months, how does that land for you in the ways that we're discussing here?
Nah. I agree with what both of them have said, right? The change behavior is a really interesting point. And I also think that we all, right, individually get to decide with all of these stars and celebrities, what our limits are, what is an appropriate amount of accountability that they have dealt with and suffered, you know, which tunes we just can't let go of, right? And that we listen to in our bedrooms by ourselves and we don't tell anybody that we're listening to, right? We all can do that. I think what is interesting to me is that at least the kinds of notable people and celebrities that I kind of want to uplift are the folks who I know, you know, are you know, delivering on the responsibility that I think that they have as those levels of public figures. And you know, we can extend grace as much as we want. And also, Kanye is not my family. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
well.
And so, you know, you do what you do, and I'm gonna do what I do.
Empathy with boundaries.
Well, speaking
Love that. We love that.
empathy with boundaries is right. I'm with you there. I would say, as we're running out of time here, but I want to touch on this last piece. We saw the Supreme Court this past week give us a ruling that was about about conversion therapy. And I think as a queer person, I've been really, really challenged by the way that we see conversion therapy seemingly possibly going to be coming back in different kinds of ways. Reverend Carmen Michael Smith, I just kind of want to get your top line thoughts on what we're seeing and what we can expect.
Well, from what I understand with the court, because I'm not a lawyer, but the courts put it back on the states to prove as a freedom of speech issue that you have to prove the harm. And I'm here to advocate for freedom of speech all day long. That is a freedom. Conversion therapy is not freedom. That's fear dressed up as care. And so my challenge is the courts have missed the mark, in my opinion, because if we're going to then sanction fear in this way and then put the onus on the states, I write about this in my book, Holy Queer. We have all of the evidence of how telling someone that they are fundamentally wrong and they need to change, how bad that is, how harmful that is, how traumatic that is. It's like starting a conversation with, you know what your problem is? That's traumatic. You go in telling somebody that they're wrong from the beginning, and conversion therapy has it built into the title. You need to change because you are wrong. And so I think the courts have missed it because the harm is built into the title.
And, yeah, and I want to say I want to challenge too my fellow psychologists, clinicians that might be tempted. I hope not to get roped into the politics of this whole thing, but the APA removed homosexuality from the DSM over 50 years ago. So part of the resistance is to not participate in conversion therapy, right? Like, don't even, whoever is thinking about doing that right now, this is your opportunity. This is your moment to stand in solidarity as an ally to the LGBTQIA community. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Tre'vell, since we parted ways at Fanti and have gone into the other work that we're doing, you are now executive director of the Trans Journalists Association. And I'm curious how this story, this moment is resonating with you.
Well, so what I would say is that this is not the first time that we have seen this administration in particular take steps to roll back a host of rights for a host of communities. I would say that the ruling presents yet another opportunity and on-ramp for folks who maybe you haven't been as engaged. Maybe it was the conversion therapy ruling that made you go, something's off here. For others, it was the, abortion ruling, bodily autonomy ruling last year, right? For others, it was the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, right? We all have, our various on-ramps. And if this is yours, what I would say to you is that, this is the time period and where you get to do something You get to be responsive, right, and respond to this moment and figure out how you can continue to show up for whether it is the LGBTQ community in a position of allyship and accomplishment, or to show up for yourself, right? If you are a member of this community, what we've seen from, in particular, right, the Supreme Court, but the entire conservative administration that we are dealing with, is that all of us on this here call right now at minimum, and I would imagine the majority of the people in our here audience here at the Jarrett Hill Show, right? You will wake up one day and not have some rights the way this thing is going. And the reality is many of us have already woken up, right? And not had any rights that we had the day before. And so this is an opportunity to get involved, to do some self-education, to figure out how you yourself can push back, right? How you yourself can build spaces of safety and accountability in your local communities. And if you happen to have a couple dollars, you can donate to the Trans Journalists Association at transjournalists.org. Amen.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I am grateful for all of y'all's input on these different stories. Before we let you go, I want to give you all a chance to tell people where they can connect with the work that you're doing. And Karmen, you're going to be sticking around, but tre'vell, why don't you tell people what you're working on, where they can find you, and also that they can find us in Boston in June.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm like Phaedra Parks. I got a lot of jobs. Okay. Jarrett already mentioned I'm executive director of the Trans Journalists Association. We're a nonprofit organization that is promoting accurate, nuanced coverage of trans rights and communities and supporting the careers of gender expansive journalists. You can find our work online at Trans Journalists on any social media platform and at transjournalists.org. And my work as a freelance journalist and film critic, you can find at The Seated Show podcast over on the YouTubes or wherever you are listening to wonderful podcasts. And Jarrett and I, because he loves being in business with me, y'all, we will be in Boston on June 18th doing our live game show, Historically Black Phrases Live, with Jarrett Hill and tre'vell Anderson at WBUR. If you're in the area, come check us out. Tickets on sale now.
Yes, you can go to historicallyblackphrases.com for more information on that. Thank you, tre'vell. I appreciate you for being here for this first episode.
My pleasure.
All righty. Corey, tell people where they can find out more about your upcoming book and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. You can find me across all social media channels at Corey Emanuel. You can find me on YouTube, my TEDx entitled Your Influence is Your Legacy. Be sure to check that out. And then my book, Empathy Crisis, Reclaiming Our Ability to Feel in a World of Emotional Numbness, will hit bookstores in October this year.
Very excited about that. I feel like it is a very timely conversation around empathy, and excited for people to check out the Empathy Crisis. Corey, thank you so much for being here for this first episode. I will also say that the Jarrett Hill Show is going to be bringing you these multi-segment conversations, but also we'll be doing long-form conversations with folks that we think that you should hear from. The first episode is going to be from me. I've been gone for the last 2 years off mic, and Dr. Corey and I had a conversation about where I've been over the last 2 years. And actually, I'm going to play you a clip from that you're going to see on Friday. Dr. Corey, thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
As a Black, gay, 30-something man who is sexually active and single, the church is not saying anything to me about sex. I'm feeling like sadness, I'm feeling frustration, I'm feeling denial, I'm feeling like so many different things. Dating over the last 2 years has actually been challenging.
So you went into divinity school as a Christian, and since having graduated, you made this bold statement that I used to be a Christian.
So sin is a construct of a power system. It is not inherent. It is not self-evident. Like, God didn't come up with sin. Religion came up with sin.
Jarrett and I have a friendship that spans 15 years. So I know this man very well, but these questions that I'm asking I don't know all the answers to.
Also, like, so God just likes me more than like the children in Palestine? Or those things don't make sense to me, and I don't know that I would want to worship or serve a God that did think that way. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Or what is the way that I think about sex now? I've always been a non-monogamous. Well, I've been non-monogamous for many years now. I really attract a monogamous nigga. You can check out that interview in full on our different platforms, YouTube, Substack, all the different places, jarretthill.com for more information on that. That will be on Friday. So now, I told you that each week I want to talk to someone that I consider a troublemaker, someone who is doing work that is kind of challenging the way that we think about things or the way that systems exist, the status quo. And I want to bring Karmen Michael-Smith back into the conversation because Karmen, you and I have been friends now 2.5 years, something like that. Something
before
along
you
those
went
lines.
into seminary, about a year or so before then.
Before divinity school. You guys say seminary. tre'vell been telling people I went to Bible college. See how y'all do? See? People like, tre'vell said you went to Bible college? I'm like, that's not what I did. But since I went to divinity school, I read the book that you've written, Holy Queer, The Coming Out of Jesus Christ, as I was just asking myself some questions and figuring out if divinity school is something that was right for me or that I wanted, and found your book, connected with you on social media, and have become friends with you over the years. And I'm really grateful for your perspective. Can you tell people a little bit about what Holy Queer is before we get into the conversation around the piece that you wrote?
Yes, it's a critique of the Black church. It's a bit of the experience. I wanted to put flesh on the experience of the Black, queer, gay, same gender loving faithful, because we exist, but people often talk about us in the church, but don't talk to us. So I wanted to give a firsthand account, sort of an epistle of sorts, to say, this is who we are, this is how we operate. And also critique the harm that is done when you don't actually talk to us. So it is that, and it uses the tomb of Christ being in the tomb and then coming out, which we just celebrated Resurrection Sunday, as an example of being in the closet and coming out and having people not recognize you, act like you're brand new, like they've never known this person before, and how you become empowered when you actually step out of the tomb.
I on Sunday, and I talk about this in the JQ&A interview that will be out on Friday. Sunday this year was challenging for me with Easter because so many people that I'm friends with, that I'm in community with, are Christian and are celebrating Easter. Where are you in your own spiritual journey as far as church is concerned and being engaged with Christianity? You are Reverend Karmen Michael-Smith. So where are you in your faith journey right now?
I thank you. It is a title. I don't really care. I'm Karmen. The title just is something that carries. But I will say in my journey, it has grown over the years, because people often say you go into seminary as the cemetery. So they would tell you in the Black church, don't go because that's where your faith goes to die. But what it does is that it teaches you to look at the Bible as a historical document, not as this is how you live right, but this is actually what happened, who God was speaking to. When you can see it in that context, then something you said in the last clip about, sin as a construct, it's something that is made up. You begin to see how it has been perverted and corrupted. And so for a long time, I used to apologize for being Christian. But I was like, I'm a Christian, but I'm not that kind of Christian. I'm a pastor, but I'm not your grandmother's pastor. But at this point, I am so tired of people of the way, Christianity, however you want to call it. These were all the things that were called for people who followed Christ. I am tired of the corruption that comes with the title, that we say that this is how it is, that you're supposed to be Christian. And if you're not perfect and you're not that, no, this is what it looks like to be a Christian. So I happily accept that title at this point. It took me a journey to get there, but this is what it looks like to be a Christian. If you don't agree with that, that's okay. But I consider myself a Christian. If you say, oh, but you're gay, that's fine. That's you. I'm a Christian. And this is what it looks like in its fullness.
I want to take what's going to feel like a left-hand turn, but we'll come back around for folks. You have started a business for yourself, that is not related to religion or faith or any of that. You started something. Tell people what you started and why.
Farage Atelier, we are a luxury heritage brand that is building. We're a little under a year old. And it started because I was a DEI worker. I worked in the federal government. And one day we're at work. That night, I get a text from a friend who says, I'm so sorry for you, sending you hugs. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm watching television. So I was like, right back at you. And then I started to get the information that tomorrow at 3 p.m., your offices are closing. You're going on administrative leave for a month. And so we went on administrative leave for a month. They didn't have a plan for us. No one knew what to do. Even the next day, it was like, do I go to meetings? No one knew what to do. And I had some time to heal. I had saved some money. We didn't get severance like everybody else did, but I had time to really commune, to heal, to get rid of some of the stress of being a DEI worker in the federal government. And in that time, I was trying to figure out what the next step for me was. And that's when I was having a conversation 9 months later with someone about, pumpkin spice season is coming up. And I was like, I don't really like pumpkin spice because I don't have a memory for it, but I wish someone would make a sweet potato pie latte. And I heard it differently because I talked about it over the years. So I went home and I was like, well, I know how to cook. I'm my grandmother's child. I know how to do this stuff. So I was trying to come up with, how do I make a sweet potato pie latte and then be able to sell it at markets? This was my, I'll do this on the weekends. And immediately when I got it done in 30 days and got the company going and I did my first tasting, it was like 37 days later and it just blew up. And so for me, it became as a way of using all of my skills and all of my talents to not only just create a syrup, but that the syrup goes into everything. Think of it as an elixir. It goes into matcha, it goes into coffee, it goes on food, it goes into desserts, it goes into spirits. But it's a way of saying the drink creates conversation. You take a moment to stop, have a drink, you sip, it strikes a memory, you're having a conversation with someone, that conversation becomes connection, and that's how formation and community comes together. And so it is sort of a ministry for me. It's just not preaching.
So for one, I want to say you sent me a package the other day, and I will say it's already halfway gone. I should say the bottle this is Aunt Nita Sweet Potato Soul. And when we talked about this and discussing having you on the show, I was intrigued by the way that you thought about this, because you said that it was related to the way that you think about tithing, which was something that was kind of unexpected for me. Can you explain that?
Yes, there's a system in tithing that we're taught, will a man rob God, yet he's robbed me? Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse. And I really looked at that because I had been laid off and I'm like, I want to pay my tithes. I want to give and sow into a ministry, all the things we're told to do. And God was really dealing with me. And I remember waking up one morning about 5:30, which I often wake up early. And I heard the voice clearly that says, the formula's all wrong for tithing. We've got it backwards. And so I set up and I then get into my bag of okay, what are we talking about? Let me write this down. And it was the formula of, you give your first, it goes to an institution, and then blessing will come to you. And it's like, well, then how are we robbing God? And God is like, yeah, you're robbing me in tithes and offerings. So I'm really digging, and I realized we had the formula wrong, because the storehouse that we would pay tithes to used to be in the temple early in the scriptures. So when Malachi says this, the people are been exiled for over 70 years in Babylon, and they come home and they're looking around and they're like, well, the temple is rebuilt and the walls of Jericho are rebuilt, but none of this feels like home. Sort of like after COVID, when people would go back out to their favorite restaurant, but it didn't taste the same, but it wasn't there anymore. And so people started sort of hoarding what they had. They weren't without, they just began to hoard what they had. And so that began a faithless system. And I look at, if we're tithing our time, our tenth, our talent, not just money, but we're tithing our lives really to institutions. It's like sowing a seed 5 blocks down the street, but standing in your backyard saying, God, where's the blessing of food? Well, you didn't sow a seed here. And Jesus comes along later and says, do you not know that you are the temple? And I thought, oh, the temple is in here. So the storehouse has to be in the temple, the place where God resides. So we've not been sowing into ourselves. And then you begin to look at the talents that you have. And so if the gift of God is life, it's breath in your body, then what is the return on investment? To give that away to someone else? No, we're supposed to be taking all those talents and all of those gifts, and we're supposed to be giving our first thoughts, our first intention, our first fruits, our best thinking and ideas to this investment that God has breathed life into so that we produce. And when we produce, when we sow into our own selves, then God can give us an overflow. But when we're scattered, it leaks out. It goes in different places. The gift that's, no room to receive, that's the overflow. When you test God and you pour into yourself, as I did with Farage Atelier, that's when it like overflows into offering.
I you know well enough what I've been experiencing as far as Christianity is concerned, and I'm really challenged by all of it. And you talk about the Bible being a historical document, and I often say that as well. Like it's a historical document. It was never intended to be like an instruction manual for life. It was people writing letters, people writing songs, people writing different elements of like what their experience has been trying to connect to the divine. It was not, I'm going to write this down to tell you what you need to do to whatever, we believe about that. You talk in your piece about tithing with your life. And I think you touched on this a little bit, but you wrote this piece called The Twisted Tenth, and you can find it on Substack, on Karmen Substack, or online. And I'm curious how you think about tithing with your life. What does that mean to you?
It is giving your first fruits, your best, out to anyone, to yourself, to an institution. And what we have been taught to do is to give our first, even when we're in deficit, even when our mind is scattered and fragmented in different places. We're supposed to show up and give like our best ideas and our best thinking and our best, innovation to a company. And the company prospers, but we don't. And that's where we have the system twisted, because we are literally giving our lives. We have been giving this investment of a good idea, of a business idea, of a innovation, of a system for your home, to maintain and run all of this first that God gives you first. We're giving out to other people. And when we sow it somewhere else, it's fine. I'm not telling people not to sow. I'm saying when you don't sow here, then your life remains empty. And if we look at our institutions and say they're barely getting by, if the lights are barely staying on in my house, then don't be surprised that when we look at the institution, the sanctuary is dim. It's just a reflection of our own lives.
As I'm having trouble with my own like relationship to Christianity, that's resonant in various different kinds of ways. In the piece, you have a line that I want to know what this means to you. You said, God multiplies what is gathered, not what is scattered. For those that are tuning in, what are some examples of what a scattered life might look like?
A scattered life might look like all of your first going to different places. So you give your best to your spouse or your children of your time. You give your best ideas to your job. You give that innovation, that spark, that best meal, the best of you, the first that should be like right off the top. Because we think about the first as like the creme de la creme. It rises to the top. This is your first. You're giving it out, but you're giving it out over here at Mount Calvary Baptist, and you're giving it out over here with
not you naming my first church. The church I grew up in.
See, there's a Mount Calvary Baptist everywhere and a Shiloh mission
everywhere.
You're giving it to your sorority fraternity. You're giving it to your college. You're giving it to your kids. You're giving it to the book that you want to write, but you haven't really given time to that. So you only give a little bit there. You're giving all of this out, and then you're waiting for abundance. And I say in the piece that when the windows of heaven finally open up and you haven't gathered all that stuff, when it doesn't have a container to hold the blessing, it leaks out. Tithing builds you. You are the container. You are the temple. And if you're not giving the first here, then you're fragmented. Even your thoughts, you think, oh, I should do this. We talk about this all the time. The 50 ideas that we get a day and having a container to write those down. But if we even scatter our attention across, this social media over here and this social media over here. I'm gonna close this and I'm gonna go over here and then I'm gonna go to this dating app and then we're even fragmenting our minds. We talk about this with ADHD. You know, it fragments the mind and you're doing too much. It's the same thing. We are the temple. So if we don't gather it all in one place and let it create a container to hold the blessing, then we will never have it because it will always leak out.
Okay, so to bring this back around, there's someone watching who's like, so what this got to do with starting a syrup business? Like, what? How do you? Because I say that because I went to divinity school and came out with art, and people were like, so what that got to do? Well, what you went to school for? And like, I talk about it, and we'll talk about it in the JQ&A as well. But like, how do you think about how do you answer that question when you are posed that? Like, what is this? How does this connect back to the business that you started?
Tithing builds the person. And when you gather all of it, think of a goulash or a stew. When you gather all of your life experiences, every job, every relationship, every skill that you had to do public speaking over here, you had to do teaching and train people over here, you had to learn how to data entry over here. When you start taking a tenth, the best of all of your life and stir it up into a bowl, that's what happened to me. I had time to actually get coherent. These things look fragmented, that I was doing public speaking, and then I was writing books, and then I was preaching, and then I was also teaching people how to, use their Apple products in this job, and then I was over here doing this. And so it all looks fragmented. But when you bring it all in-house and start giving your first to yourself, it builds you. And I got coherence, and that coherence showed up as a syrup business, which is more than just business. It's really a ministry of connection and bringing us back to who we are and have forgotten. And so we use syrup as a way to do that. But that's what came with my coherence. I stirred up all my gifts. I didn't do that intentionally in the beginning. I created this business. It skyrocketed within the first month. And I stopped for a moment and said, this is calling upon every gift and talent I have. I can see every job I've ever done in this business. Almost like you had to do all of those things, and you had to be fired from here, and you had to be let go from here. You had to be tired of that and then move here. I mean, I have made the most money I'd ever made, near $200,000. And I'm working and was stressed and pre-diabetic because my cortisol levels were high from the stress and trying to work and all of this stuff. And when that all went away, it's like I got clear, and it came with coherence, and coherence produced for Forge Atelier.
I did the post about not being Christian anymore, and I feel like saying that and then referencing a sermon that I gave in divinity school might be a little confusing. But I went in divinity school, I gave this sermon that was my first one ever, and it was called "So That Nothing Is Lost," and it was a reference to the 2 fishes and 5 loaves story that we've all heard. And I say in that sermon that I use the example of breaking the Melania Trump plagiarism story in 2016 in the way that that moment and everything that came after it required all of the things that I had been doing before that moment to come together in the way that I hear you speaking about building this business. And I can say that that was a moment where I felt all of those things come together and felt like there's definitely some divine alignment, right? Even though for me, well, I'm not a Christian anymore, I still believe in God. I still have faith, and still, see that power as something that is real, that I believe in. But as I hear you say that, it brings to mind So That Nothing Is Lost and how that happened for me. So I appreciate that. Karmen, tell people where they can find you, find this beautiful business that you are growing, and all the work that you're doing.
Well, you can find me at karmenmichael.com. That's Karmen with a K. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. I really spend more time on Instagram and Substack, Karmen Michael Smith. You can find me there. I message and talk back and all of that. And Forge Atelier, Forage. It's actually pronounced Forage Atelier, but Forge Atelier. And you can.
I'm only saying Forage because I saw the accent mark, so I'm definitely going to be calling it Forage.
Well, I'm down here in Dallas.
Yes,
Forge Atelier. I was like, or Atla is what I've also got.
Forage Atelier. There you go. Karmen, thank you for being a part of this first episode of the Jarrett Hill Show.
Thank you for having me.
For sharing so much of your talent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am grateful to all of y'all for being here as well and joining us for this first conversation. We'll be here each week. We'll be doing 12 episodes for this season. We're not going to be here every week of every month throughout the year, but we are going to be here having conversations with folks about the things that are happening in the world and the ways that we can have an impact on them. One of the things that's really important to me is thinking about what we can do now and next in the moment that we're experiencing here in the United States and around the world. And I want people to be able to get a better sense of how we can respond to this moment. So many of us, as tre'vell named earlier, most of the people that are listening to this show probably are going to wake up in this country one day and see that their rights are either being infringed upon or threatened, if not completely taken away. And I think that it's really important for us to be thinking about how we can stand up in this moment, how we can resist, how we can begin to think about how we build something new after the revolution comes, because I'm sure that it is coming soon. I also want to shout out to all of the people who are out there listening who have followed my work or are just finding me. We have so many exciting things to discuss over the coming weeks that are exciting, but also challenging and difficult and fun and curiosity inducing and various different things. So I'm excited for you to join us here every week. We will be live every week on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. We will also then be dropping a long form interview on Fridays. And the podcast of this live show on Wednesday will come out on Thursday. So you guys will be able to engage with us throughout the week. You can follow me on social media at Jarrett Hill on the Twitter, on the Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. If you're on TikTok, I'm Jarrett on TikTok because I couldn't get Jarrett Hill. So Jarrett Hill on TikTok. All of those things are available to follow. Before we go, I just want to say a little something to two very important people who are helping to make this show happen. And there they are. I just want to say thank you to both of you, Danielle and Jessica, who are executive producer and segment producer on the show and have been working with me for weeks and months. Jessica, I had a conversation with you about this while I was overseas. Danielle, you and I have been in Boston while I was there quite a bit and have been friends for years as well. I'm grateful for both of y'all offering so much of your time and talent to be here, a part of making the show happen. Thank you. Danielle, do you want to say something before we wrap up here?
Yeah, thank you for having us, first of all. We're going to tan. It's going to be more melanated the next time we're on here. It's looking real light-skinned on the producing team. I'm sorry. I'm excited for people to watch all this stuff and everything we bring to the table and revolt. Everybody revolt. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, flip some tables, do some things. Jessica, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
This was a stellar first show, and I'm so proud of everyone, and I'm so proud to be a part of this.
You guys that are watching or listening, you will be hearing more from these folks, if you're watching. You'll be hearing more from them. They are fantastic. They have great experience in producing and also just in living and being in the world. So I'm grateful for both of y'all being here. This show is executive produced by me and Danielle, segment produced by Jessica, and we will see you all here next time. Thank you, and we'll see you.
Yay.
Bye, y'all. Hey, what's up? I'm Jarrett, and you just finished watching a clip from The Jarrett Hill Show. The Jarrett Hill Show, me being Jarrett Hill. And I would love it if you would like, subscribe, share with your friends, talk to someone about what you saw, and we'll see you next time. Hey, what's up? I think we're out of here.
I don't know. I think it's still live, Jarrett.
I think it's still live. I'm pretty sure people are still looking at us. Mm-hmm. It looks like it.